Greetings, friends. I'm Dave Elden from Judging for the Win, and today we're going to be talking about the KCI Combo deck. This is the most complicated, most playable combo deck around since Revelark was in Standard. So you know it's going to be really interesting, really fun to talk about, and also really important for everybody to understand how all the interactions work. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to need to go infinite is KCI. That is the namesake card of the deck, Krark-Clan Ironworks. This lets you sacrifice an artifact to add 2 to your mana pool. And the other card that the deck really needs to come together is Scrap Trawler. This card lets you return an artifact with a lower converted mana cost anytime something goes to the graveyard. Mirror Retriever is another card we're going to need to go infinite. That's because of the restriction Scrap Trawler has. We're going to be sacrificing a bunch of artifacts to make mana and getting them all back. Since Scrap Trawler only lets you return cheaper artifacts, you're going to need another returner to get back the most expensive thing you sacrifice, and Mirror Retriever fits the bill. So with this, we're almost ready to go. We're going to need 2 more artifacts that cost less than 2 mana so that we're netting mana on each iteration of the loop. We're going to use Mox Opal and Chromatic Sphere because those are the cards that they used on the Wizards of the Coast website when they wrote about this combo. So once you have all 5 of these in play, what can we do? How about drawing infinite cards? So we're going to tap and sacrifice the Mox Opal and give ourselves 3 mana, one of which is any color we want. Here's where it gets tricky. Announce that you're activating Chromatic Sphere. As part of the process of activating an ability, you get a chance to activate mana abilities. Obviously, you don't need any more mana to activate Chromatic Sphere, but there's nothing saying you can't take advantage of that rule here to make some more. So sacrifice Mirror Retriever, and finally KCI itself, for 4 more mana, bringing you up to 7 total, one of which is any color. Doing so will cause Mirror Retriever's ability to trigger once, and Scrap Trawler's ability to trigger for KCI and Mirror Retriever. It will also trigger for Chromatic Sphere when that gets sacrificed, as the costs to activate its ability are paid. Paying the 1 generic mana to activate that ability brings us down to 6 total. All these triggered abilities don't go on the stack right away. They wait until a player is about to get priority, which in this case means right after we finish resolving Chromatic Sphere's ability. Since this is a mana ability, it resolves right away before players get priority. That draws you a card and brings us back to 7 mana, 2 of which are any color we want. Because choosing targets for a triggered ability happens as part of the process of putting that ability on the stack, Mirror Retriever, Krark-Clan Ironworks, and Chromatic Sphere will all be in your graveyard when you're choosing what to return with your Scrap Trawler and Mirror Retriever triggers. This is why we needed to sacrifice Mirror Retriever and Krark-Clan Ironworks as part of activating an ability. If we sacrificed them normally, the way we did with Mox Opal, KCI wouldn't be in the graveyard at the time that we needed to pick a target for Mirror Retriever's ability. Because we did things the way we did, both artifacts are in the graveyard before targets get chosen. So we can return Mirror Retriever with Scrap Trawler's trigger from KCI going to the graveyard, Chromatic Sphere with the Scrap Trawler trigger from Mirror Retriever dying, and KCI with the Mirror Retriever trigger from itself dying. We'll also return Mox Opal with the Scrap Trawler trigger from Chromatic Sphere dying. Then we'll use all 7 of our mana to replay Krark-Clan Ironworks, Mirror Retriever, and Chromatic Sphere, which puts us exactly where we started, but with an extra card in hand from Chromatic Sphere's ability. If you're running out of cards in your library, you can still do this loop to get more mana. You just need to sacrifice Mirror Retriever and KCI in the process of casting a spell. Once you get a second Scrap Trawler or Mirror Retriever, getting infinite mana is trivial because of the extra return triggers you get. After you get infinite mana, you have to finish your opponent off somehow. KCI decks have most commonly turned to Pyrite Spellbomb for this task. Let's take a look at how that works. Remember, we have infinite mana, and Mox Opal and Chromatic Sphere make colored mana, so we don't need to worry about paying for any mana costs anymore. Starting with all your artifacts in play, you just need to activate Pyrite Spellbomb's 2 damage ability and sacrifice Mirror Retriever and Krark-Clan Ironworks as part of the process of activating this ability. As before, we're going to return KCI with the Mirror Retriever dying trigger, then return Pyrite Spellbomb with the Scrap Trawler trigger for Mirror Retriever, and Mirror Retriever with the Scrap Trawler trigger for KCI. Use some of your infinite mana to replay all 3 artifacts, and repeat until your opponent is dead. This whole combo is pretty complicated, and there's a lot of ways that you can mess it up. For instance, because you can only activate mana abilities while you're casting a spell or activating an ability that requires a mana payment, you can't sacrifice KCI and Mirror Retriever while you're, say, casting Mox Opal or activating Mox Opal's ability. These do not require a mana payment, so the game never gives you a chance to activate mana abilities while you're casting or activating them. Another thing to be careful of is sacrificing Scrap Trawler for mana. After you sacrifice Scrap Trawler, it won't be in play to see any subsequently sacrificed artifacts hit the graveyard. Even though it seems like the artifacts all hit the graveyard at the same time, there's actually an order to it defined by the order they get sacrificed. So if you sacrifice first Scrap Trawler and then KCI in the process of casting a spell, you would be able to return a 2-drop, but you wouldn't be able to return a 3-drop because Scrap Trawler wasn't in play to see KCI go to the graveyard. Of course, you can't sacrifice KCI first and then Scrap Trawler, because after you sacrifice KCI, there won't be anything in play letting you sacrifice Scrap Trawler for mana anymore. This has another important consequence if you're sacrificing Scrap Trawler in the process of activating a chromatic sphere or star. Because the step where you can activate mana abilities happens before the step where you pay costs in the process of activating an ability, you won't get a Scrap Trawler trigger from your chromatic artifact hitting the graveyard if you sacrifice Scrap Trawler for mana while activating that ability. In this case, the Scrap Trawler would die while you're generating mana, and it won't be around to see the chromatic sphere or star die in the next step when you pay the cost. Some closing thoughts before I sign off. First, this isn't the only way to go infinite with this deck. There are a lot of variations that are possible depending on what the KCI player has available. So if a player describes a loop that's different from what I described here, he or she isn't necessarily wrong. Just make sure that the player can accurately describe what trigger is letting him or her get each artifact back, and look for the crucial step of sacrificing both Mirror Retriever and KCI as part of casting a spell or activating an ability, which allows each one to return the other. Remember, players aren't judges, so it's not necessary for someone to describe the combo in the level of detail I just did, as long as it's clear that he or she understands what each step is. Finally, yes, infinity doesn't exist in Magic. Whenever I said that before, it was an abuse of notation. In a real game, the player will have to specify a number of times to perform a loop. Drawing 30 cards and netting 1,000,000 mana sure does feel like infinity from a gameplay perspective though. I hope this answered all your questions about the KCI combo. If you have any others, you can email judgingftw@gmail.com or check out the article that's linked below. Until next time, this is Judging for the Win, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.